He's getting flack for someone made a N-word compilation of his podcast.
Yes. And that's like part 2 of the story.
Yeah.
Because this all begins, I believe...
Yeah, he had a previous apology to that.
So, first of all, that video has been out for a long time. I've ran across that video on the internet and just seen it and be like, oh, well. So it's not like a new video, unless they made like a better version of like faster cuts.
They might have just like put that video on Twitter and then it like went viral again or something.
But this actually began, it really took off when, have you heard about the Neil Young thing?
Oh, yeah. That was the first issue.
This is the first thing.
That was the first thing.
So Neil Young, American rocker, which I'm not going to lie, probably one of the most requested people when I play out, but I had never bothered learning any of his stuff. Because to be honest, I've heard some of his stuff and like I know people liked it. It never struck me. None of his music ever struck me enough to be like, oh, I'm going to sit down and learn this and like incorporate it in my set. But he says he's pulling off his music from Spotify because
like Rogan was giving out misinformation on health shit. Yeah.
So then that spurs, because I mean, there was a whole thing like this thing with Spotify has been going on for a little bit, because there was that thing like I don't even know if it was a whole year ago, probably was about a year ago at this point, where like there were like some Spotify employees that were like doing some shit, you know what I'm talking about, where they were like had a petition from like a couple Spotify employees that were like, we need to take more charge over what Joe Rogan's doing and blah, blah, blah.
This was like when he first signed his deal.
Yes. And then of course, when he did get transferred to Spotify dropped, I think it was in the double digits of episodes, just like of his more controversial ones. Like they dropped the Gavin McInnes one. They dropped the Milo Yiannopoulos one. I think they may have dropped one of the older Alex Jones ones, not the one most recent. So there's always been this kind of thing where Spotify's just been like, I don't know. But there was always kind of this, like, I was keeping my fingers crossed, like, all right, like, those are things that are already on YouTube. So, like, Spotify doesn't want to carry him. That's fine. Hopefully they don't wind up pressuring him in the future now that he's exclusive with them.
Yeah.
And up to this point, they hadn't. And still are trying not to, I might add. Hope. So Neil Young says, you know, he's doing this. And then about like 3 days later, Joni Mitchell comes out and does the same thing. And the whole premise is based off of the 2 podcasts that they alluded to as in spreading COVID misinformation. He had the one guy named Dr. Peter McCullough, who's like, I don't know what this means, but he's like the most published, I think he's a cardiologist or immunologist or something, virologist, epidemiologist, whatever. He's something that like has to do with the thing. You know what I mean? And he's like one of the most published doctors in that field. And he came on and was talking about the vaccines and like the way COVID was being handled and shit like that. And then about a month later, I think he had another guy named Dr. Robert Malone on, who kind of was doing the same thing. Both doctors, both just kind of like giving like another angle at the way things were being handled, talking about the, you know, mind you, both vaccinated. They're both talked about, like, I have the vaccine. I'm not telling you shouldn't get the vaccine. I'm just here to talk about, like, here's what's going on. Here's how it's being handled, blah, 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 blah. So this is seen by a lot of people as to be misinformation. I don't really know. To be honest, I don't remember how this built up. I just remember waking up one morning and then seeing Neil Young was doing that. And then conveniently around that time, because I updated my computer last week, I was telling you, right? And so in order to update my computer, I had to go in the Apple store. So I go in there, and then I see at the very top of the thing, Neil lives here. Joni lives here. So like Apple was like pushing like, we got him now, you know? And like Amazon was doing the same thing. In fact, the Washington Post, which is also owned by Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, put out an article like, here's how you can cancel your Spotify subscription and move all your music without losing it to Amazon, whatever.
Jeez.
So it was like really weird. It was like this weird, and like you could say it's like opportunistic. You also wonder, is it coordinated? You don't fucking know. But what's really interesting is, so they put this thing out, and these another important note here is, so far all the musicians that have come out that I'm aware of, the ones that have made high profile statements about like pulling off of Spotify, are all like done releasing music. Like Taylor Swift's not doing that. Drake's not doing that. It's all people that are kind of like Neil Young. Not saying Neil Young, people don't listen to him on Spotify, but it's like, it's like a lot of these, I'll get into it later. So that comes out, and the general consensus is kind of like, dude, we're not going to like pull down. We're not going to like tell him to do, like, he can't have certain people on. We're not going to do this shit, blah, blah, blah. People are saying like, look, like, you're saying this is misinformation, but at the same time, it's like the thing that really bugged me, I think, about the whole situation is I feel like it's a very limp dick like defense of being like, because there's people that like most people agree that Joe Rogan should not be pulled off of fucking Spotify. That's most people. I've met I don't think I've ever met somebody in person that's like, yeah, he shouldn't be on Spotify. But there's this kind of like limp dick defense of him where they're like, look, anybody who listens to Joe Rogan for advice is a fucking idiot. Anyway, it's like people don't watch Joe Rogan to hear his advice.
Yeah, he doesn't really give advice on the show.
Like, he's not Alex Jones where he just sits alone at a desk and rants into a microphone. Every episode, he has a guest on who is some level of specialization or expertise, whether it's wrong expertise or good expertise, but that's what their thing. And he has them on and he talks to them. So like when he has on doctors that talk about the vaccine, that's not Joe Rogan giving his opinion. He's a good interviewer. He's good at asking questions and getting the information he wants out of him. But to say that like basically you're talking about like this is misinformation because they said this, they said this, they said this, and you watch how the public perception was just like, dude, we don't fucking care. And then a week later, that N-word video comes out. So basically, you're seeing that like the attempt at canceling Joe Rogan for the COVID shit didn't work because it didn't really hit hard enough for most people. Most people were sitting there like, dude, look, I've heard a billion different things about every single thing. Half the shit that was reported to be misinformation a year ago is now common knowledge. Like there was a time, we talked about this in the podcast before, where like if you made a post on Facebook 2 years ago saying this virus was leaked from the lab, it wasn't just a fucking wet market or whatever, that would be taken down. Your account would be flagged. All of a sudden, 6 months later, halfway through 2020 into the pandemic, now that was considered a viable theory. And so now they're not blocking people. So you're allowed to talk about it now. We talked about that with Ben Smith when he was on here before. Like, okay, now you're allowed to think this. You weren't allowed to think this 6 months ago. It was equally true 6 months ago, but you just weren't allowed to talk about it 6 months ago. Then when the vaccines first came out, they said, when you have the vaccine, you can't get it or spread it. Now it's commonly accepted knowledge that, yeah, you still get COVID when you have the vaccine. You just get a lesser, you're not as symptomatic. You can still spread COVID when you have the vaccine. You know what I mean? This is common knowledge now that if you were to say a year ago, it was reported to be misinformation. So what you have is you have this science coming out that is the consensus opinion on a thing. And anybody who says anything against that is labeled misinformation. And then if in a certain amount of time, say months later or a year later, it turns out that the people that were saying this thing were correct, now that's, the science has changed. But it's like, no, you have people that were saying that same thing a year ago where they were being flagged for me. You have people that are still saying that they're being flagged for misinformation. And so people just didn't really get on board because it's like, dude, like, you guys have changed your fucking story so many times that like, maybe there's a reason why people are listening to fucking Rogan. People want to hear what other people have to fucking say. It's not like I'm listening to fucking my next door neighbor talk about the vaccine.
Yeah.
Listening to the guy, Dr. Robert Malone, has the patents for the mRNA vaccine, the technology that was used for the fucking Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. He invented that fucking technology. You don't think he's qualified to fucking talk about it? And it's not like he's on there saying the vaccine is a hoax, it's bullshit, don't get vaccinated. Again, he said, look, I'm vaccinated, my kids are vaccinated. Like, I'm not saying anything other than like, here are the facts. Here's the realities of it. Can't be accepted. Can't be tolerated. So then the general public's like, dude, we don't fucking care. Then the fucking video comes out about the whole N-word thing, which I think got more traffic. You know, I think that was really when the story kind of hit mainstream. And then, you're thinking, is this some type of like coordinated hit thing? You almost have to think.
Yeah, kind of seems like it.
And if so, who's doing it? Like who?
Like probably the people who already had ads out for it, Amazon and fucking Apple. Probably the people that had fucking signs in their stores like the next day.
Yeah. Well, you have this major corporation like Spotify who has full unabridged access to Joe Rogan, exclusive access.
Well, you got to think about it like this. It's like it's a modern version of Sirius XM when they got Howard Stern. Howard Stern was a big enough presence on like terrestrial radio that when he left, any one of his fans that still wanted to listen, they got Sirius just to listen to him.
Yeah.
And that's what Spotify is in like the modern age, where it's like, okay, if you want to watch Joe Rogan or listen to him, fucking get Spotify.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Apple and fucking Amazon or whoever else has a streaming music service doesn't like that.
And he's the most listened
Especially
to.
when like podcasts were Apple's thing. You know what I mean? Like they probably don't feel too good about that.
Oh, I'm sure they don't. I'm sure, the fact that he's exclusive on that thing is a major draw. Dude, that's why I'm on Spotify. I'm a Pandora guy. I use Pandora. I still use Pandora for music.
Yeah.
But now that like my band has music on Spotify, I'm trying to like learn that more and like kind of follow more playlists to see like where to fucking market our stuff. So like I'm slowly starting to kind of phase into it. But like, dude, the whole reason I'm on Spotify to begin with is because I realized watching YouTube for 2 months, I was like, you mean they're really not? I thought it was like a lie. I thought they were like, Joe Rogan's not gonna be on YouTube. I was like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. And I'd be sitting on my couch, and after a month, I was like, I haven't watched Rogan in like a month. What the fuck is going on? Go on Spotify, and now when I want to listen to an episode, I'm on Spotify. So like it brought in so many fucking people. So then you have the Neil Young thing happen. Then there's this report saying that Spotify's valued in the market has dropped $2 billion. Then there's all this pressure from the fucking to the CEO. I think his name is Daniel Ek at Spotify, and he comes down and he's like, okay, we agree, we don't want to be spreading blah, blah, blah. So what we're going to do is we're going to put like a disclaimer at the beginning of any episode of Rogan having to do with COVID that like, here's where you go for CDC information or whatever. And so like they kind of bend a little bit, but it's still not enough. It's never enough. It's never enough. So then the fucking N-word video comes out. It's already been out. People have seen it. It had millions of views before any of this happened. And now it has a billion
just
views.
fans.
Yeah, just fans. And so now this comes out and still Joe, and I understand why he did it. Because he's a good dude and he's an honest dude. But I really do think he made a mistake by putting out that apology video. I really do.
I mean, well, because also it wasn't really like a full apology video. Like, I think he just kind of explained himself being like, this is like how I thought about that word back then. Now I know that's not the case, so I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like it was kind of like that, and then he kind of talked about how it was a hit job.
But
it's kind of funny.
Here's the thing, though. That's what you do when somebody calls you out on something that you did that truly offended them, and then they are genuinely hurt and they genuinely just want to know, like if you're in a relationship, you're dating a girl, she's pissed off at you about something, you say, hey, look, I'm sorry about that, this is what I do. And because she loves you, and because at the end of the day, her main goal isn't to fucking ruin you or destroy you, she just wants to be closer to you, you explain yourself, and because her intentions are good, she's coming from a good place, you guys move on. You acknowledge, yeah, dude, yes. There are videos of me saying that word over the past 10 years. It's not me just in a microphone being like, it's like him using it in a fucking sentence, just either quoting somebody. I'm not saying that they're all fucking, what I'm saying is like, this has been common knowledge. And the way they put it out to the public was clearly meant to, as a character assassination, obviously. And the way it was pushed out.
Yeah, how else would you describe a compilation of someone using the N-word?
Of course. I mean, it's obviously what it is.
It's so funny.
And it allows...
It's interesting that, like, I'm sure that's not the first N-word compilation that someone's made.
Of course not, dude.
It's such a niche video
it is.
category.
It took me months to find that before it was big.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's Quentin Tarantino N-word compilations.
Oh, my God. And that's the other thing.
Obviously, the famous, Kramer N-word compilation.
Dude.
It's just a hypercut of the whole Laugh Factory incident.
That is a good thing you bring up, a valid point about even, like, talking about, like, Quentin Tarantino said it in its fucking movies, like meaning it the way it's meant. Like we talked about this a little bit on Matt Brown's podcast, and he and we were talking about like saying it using.
I think the public still, and not to say what like not to excuse like any use of like the N-word or whatever, but like it's a thing where it's kind of been that way for a while, where like actors have the benefit of the doubt and the level of separation between them and a character they're playing. They can kind of get away with murder and, literally murder in most cases. Or like,
yeah,
you don't see a fucking, the guy who plays Michael Myers getting ran down the street like, oh my God, you killed those people in that movie. Like, no one believes that shit.
Yes.
But for a comedian, they're never going to not just think it's you. They're not going to understand that it's like, an exaggerated or a bigger version of a real thing or whatever. They're just going to take everything at face value just because they see a person talking into a mic and that's it. There's no like, movie magic or
but
like, you know what I mean?
I also still see a slight double standard because you have to consider the fact that like what I was saying with Matt, it's like, to me, there's a difference between saying it and using it. I think there's a major difference. If I'm singing along to a rap song and I say it, I don't consider that even close to the same ballpark as me seeing a black person and calling them that. Yeah. It's clearly not the same thing. No. It's so obviously not the same thing. And if I'm Joe Rogan and I'm quoting a fucking quote from somebody else that said something 100 years ago or 50 years ago, that is not the same as me even. So you're saying it's okay if I'm an actor who's playing a guy in a movie who's using it the way it's intended to be used. And that's fine because you're an actor playing a role. But if I'm a guy on a podcast just reading a quote from somebody, that's not okay. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying that like this weird kind of like selective, like it's never okay, but it's okay. But if we don't like you and if we already tried to attack you over this other shit and it didn't work, then now it's not okay. We're going to attack you over this, And so then you have all these people coming out. You have all these people coming out that are like, no, here's the thing. And I like, it's been said, I don't feel like I'm saying anything that hasn't already been said, but whatever. I don't believe that 9 or I would say 8 in 10 people think Joe Rogan is a racist. And anyone that I'm aware of that does has never listened to a full episode of the Rogan Experience.
Yeah.
Not a single person that I know of.
Also just like, I think people think like people see him as some sort of like genius philosopher or something, but for the most part he's just a fucking he's high talking to people and going whoa. Yeah, totally. And dude, don't get me wrong, I even like I think he's a smart guy. I think and not to discredit him or
and
anything, but like
he always calls himself an idiot, and I know that's like it almost is I don't want to say false humility because I think there is a humility there, a real humility. But he knows he's not a fucking idiot.
It's like a comedian get out of jail free card. It's the, I'm just kidding.
But like, he's not, if you listen to the way he talks to people, it's like clearly this guy's an insightful person who can carry on a conversation with anyone about anything. And there's this weird fucking like elitist way of thinking where like people that are in like the high society, like, oh, I'm a Yale grad or I do this and I blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, Joe Rogan's just an idiot. It's like, no, Joe Rogan just like there's a reason why he's so popular. There's a reason why his ratings are so far and above anybody on fucking CNN or Fox News or any of these other fucking places that like people listen to him because he talks like a regular person and he asks the questions that regular people would think. And he doesn't think he's too smart for you. He doesn't talk to you like he thinks he's smarter than you. He doesn't come on like fucking Neil deGrasse Tyson and be like, well, the thing is blah, blah, blah. Did I just blow your mind? It's like, no, you fucking didn't. You blew my mind because I thought you were cool for the past 10 years, and now I don't. So congratulations, you blew my fucking mind. Spent too much time on Reddit in college, apparently. So it's like, I hate that attack too. It's like, he's a smart dude, and he's bringing on people that are providing legitimate views, not saying they're correct, but to write off him as a fucking idiot and to say that type of shit shouldn't be allowed, and then this clear, coordinated attack at trying to remove him from Spotify, it seems to me like there's no other explanation, but there is obviously some type of, I mean, I'm going to use the word conspiracy through the literal definition of conspiracy, which is a group of people conspiring to do something. I think that it's probably fair to say that there is a coordinated sort of, you can't even say the word conspiracy because it has such a negative connotation, but I think that the word applies here, you know? And who would have guessed? And this is what I really wanted to bring it to, unless you had something to add. 2 years ago, we were sitting in here and we touched on Alex Jones when he was deplatformed from YouTube and those places. And now he can only be found on his personal website, you know. At that time, the people that were speaking in defense of, or I guess against removing him, were using what people like to call the slippery slope argument, which again is another argument that has a negative connotation. And it almost annoys me because it's like, dude, just because something has a name, or just because, like, it's even with cliches, it's like, okay, just because something's cliche doesn't mean it's not true. In fact, oftentimes the reason it is a cliche is because it's so often true that it needs not be stated. You know what I mean? Like if you you just say certain things, people are like, it's such a cliche, but it's like, oh, maybe that's because it's been proven true so many times again that it's like, it's overdone. So the slippery slope argument being that, like, well, okay, sure, they're going to come for Alex Jones, who is this kind of like wild. I don't consider him to this day a far right guy. He's never been a far right guy. He just says some like wacky shit. He's always said wacky shit. That's what people liked him for. He's an entertaining guy to listen to. Every now and then I will pop him on like once a month. I'll just be like, let me see what the fuck Alex Jones is yelling about. It's just entertaining. It's fun. And there is some stuff that you can sift from it. It's not all bullshit. It's not all true, but it's like, just like you can watch a fucking fiction movie and take a real message from it, or a real meaning or a real moral. You can do that with just about anything. And this idea that like we need these people above us to like pick and choose what we're allowed to have access to. It's like we're little kids and we're going to have like the fucking parent lock on our fucking lives. I can't believe that there's so many people that are behind that. But anyway, you have a guy like Alex Jones who, it was easy to get him off because he did say that wild and crazy shit about the Sandy Hook stuff. It was way off. And I'm sure the stuff he said about Sandy Hook had tremendously negative effects on the people that were involved, saying they're crisis actors and all this bullshit. And yes, that's what Alex Jones does, and that's what he's always done since the 90s, but he did it at a time when like he had more of a reach than he had ever had. The internet is a thing now. It wasn't as much of a thing in the 90s. People were listening to on the radio. It didn't affect people as broadly. And, it was an easy excuse, I would say, to justify taking him off. But then the slippery slope argument comes in and they say, okay, well, once you've allowed for saying that, okay, yeah, you can say what you want to say, but the second what you want to say is harming people, then you're not allowed to say what you want to say. Okay, but who decides what ideas are dangerous? That's the problem. Because the exact thing that people were thinking about 2 years ago with Alex Jones and saying, dude, okay, I agree he was way off on that and he was wrong and like he should apologize for that and blah, 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 blah. But like once you concede, once you give an inch and say, okay, fine, you can get rid of this guy, then what happens is you've already set that precedent. Now it's just one more. It used to be you wanted to get this guy, and so you're all the way over here and you go, okay, well, we'll just get this guy. That's just one step. We can take one step. And then they go, all right, well, what about this guy? And you're like, well, he's only one step over here. All we got to do is take one step. And you take this guy, and then boom. And then all of a sudden, literally all of a sudden, we're talking 2 years down the road. Now they're coming for fucking Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan had Bernie Sanders on his fucking podcast 2 years ago and all but endorsed him, saying like, I would vote for Bernie. Bernie didn't win the primaries, but like, you have a guy.
Maybe it goes all the way to the top. Maybe it's Biden doing this. Biden's pissed at Joe for not having him on.
I think, well, I would love to see that episode. I'll say that much.
Listen here, Jack.
I'm assuming you said that jokingly, and like, when I say there's money behind, I don't know who the money is, but obviously someone with a lot of fucking money. I'm not saying it's Biden, but I'm saying that because I don't necessarily think Biden is the biggest power player when it comes to all the fucking bigger corporations and things like that. That want him out of there, either because he's competition and he's beating all the fucking competition, he's not controlled by anybody, or because
could even just be fucking news because like He's getting more ratings than most
Oh,
like
100%.
talk shows, news broadcasts, all that shit.
How annoyed do you think you would be? How annoyed do you think Anderson Cooper is?
Yeah,
Or
you went to like journalism school. You like banged a fucking CEO of Fox to get your anchor position. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, great. The guy who made people eat donkey balls.
yeah,
Like-
you're the fucking person who thinks like that kind of elitist thing. Like, I'm the smart person. People should listen to what I have to say. And then you're getting fucking trounced in the ratings by some fucking dude who has Snoop Dogg on one week and smokes a whole fucking pound of weed with him and talks about random bullshit. And then next week he has fucking Dr. Robert Malone on. And next week, and mind you, in that same fucking time span, he also had Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's like CNN's resident doctor. And he had Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who also came on and spoke against the fucking vaccine skeptics and things else. So it's like, it's not like he's exclusively bringing on these people that are talking about. First of all, he's not even bringing on the people that are completely against the vaccine in the first place, at least that I've seen. He's just bringing on people that are providing a slightly different angle of looking at the way we've been handling the pandemic and the way the vaccines have been pushed and things like that. But then he also has people on that are saying, no, all that's bullshit. This is the true thing, blah, blah, blah. And so as the listener, you can listen to Sanjay Gupta one week, and then you listen to Peter McCullough the next week, and then you listen to Dr. Rhonda Patrick the next week, and you listen to Dr. Robert Malone the next week, and that's called being a fucking adult and being able to listen to things and go, I think what she said made sense about that, but also what he said makes sense about this. I can see both ways, blah, blah, blah. This is what I think.
Yeah.
We're in a position right now in society where, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be the government doing the censoring. And I know that's kind of always a loophole because it's like, well, the Constitution says you have freedom of speech, but these are private organizations that, these are private companies. Spotify's a private company. So they have, and YouTube's a private company. So they can decide for themselves if they want to do it. But when, it's kind of like when we talked about, remember that app Parler came out?
Mm-hmm. Like the fucking alternative to Twitter or whatever.
And
like
so
the right-wing Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, it was like a free speech, which ultimately meant right-wing Twitter. And so...
Well, I mean, it probably didn't help that all the people that were like right-wing and funding it were like, hey, come leave Twitter, join here.
Yeah, because they weren't allowed to be on fucking Twitter.
Yeah.
So
unfairly labeled right-wing app.
No. I mean, it was right-wing. It was fairly labeled right-wing. I never got it. My point is, though, like, I remember we talked about that at the time, and we were talking about how, like, the common trope there is, like, when you're on Twitter and then people get deplatformed, people are like, well, what the fuck? I can't speak what I think on Twitter. And it's like, well, this isn't a public institution, dude. Twitter can do what it wants. It's a private company. Why don't you go make your own Twitter? And then somebody did. Mm-hmm. Somebody did. And they had...
Well, I mean, to be fair, probably like half of those people got banned and kicked off Twitter for being like, I'm going to come to your house, AOC, and kill / fuck you. Like,
yeah, some of those
A lot of the bans were good bans.
Yeah, there were good bans, sure. Which, again, I don't really... you know what? I've seen people get fucking their heads cut off on the internet. I've seen everything happen on the fucking internet. I can live if I see somebody tweet something mean. But, okay, I get it. Twitter is Twitter, and they get to do what they want to do. But so then the people that weren't allowed on Twitter and the people that wanted to hear what the people that weren't allowed on Twitter wanted to say went to this other app called Parler. And then, so they do build their own app. And then within a fucking 3-day time span, the App Store doesn't allow it to be hosted. It's the number one most downloaded app for like those 2 days, and then the App Store pulls it down. And then it gets to the point where it's like, okay, so now we did make our own app for people that want to be on this platform, and now the bigger platform isn't allowing us to have our own platform. And so now it's like, at what point does it become... Because I've kind of had an ideological awakening of sorts in the past couple weeks about... I used to like lean towards thinking I was like slightly libertarianish, and I still do. But I was watching like a bunch of documentaries on the robber barons of the early 1900s and like Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster. And so in the late 1800s, early 1900s, during the Industrial Revolution, there were absolutely no limitations on business whatsoever. So you had these guys that were like the oil guys and like the train guys and the fucking meat industry and shit like that. And they basically just monopolized their industry. So like JP Morgan was the, I forgot, I forgot what he did, but there was like Rockefeller who did the oil thing. He was the oil guy. And then the Vanderbilts did the train stuff. And so what Rockefeller would do is he had Standard Oil, which eventually was broken down into the companies that we know today, Exxon, Amoco, Mobil, all those companies. Standard Oil, basically, they got big in one place, and then they would go to the other place, and they would just go around the country and try to buy out these smaller oil, like distilleries or whatever the fuck they're called. And he would give a good amount of money to the people that agreed to sell, and the people that didn't agree to sell, he would buy everyone around them and make the prices so incredibly low at those places that he bought that the guy who was trying to stay in business could not compete. He would make prices ridiculously low and then just wait for the guy to collapse and not be anything, and go in and give him and then he'll buy his worthless business for like $0.
Yeah.
And so they would go around and basically put the squeeze on everybody. And it got to the point where it was like he owned everything. And then he was making deals with the train monopoly saying that when you ship our stuff, we get cheaper rates. And when you get cheaper rates to transport oil, that means that you can sell the oil to the customer at a lower rate because there's less shipping costs involved with it. So then the train companies agreed to give him inside information on the rates they were giving to other people and how they were doing their shipments, and then giving him rebates on it. And they found out all about this, and we're finding out that these private companies were basically monopolizing the industry to the point where it made it impossible for anyone else to even function. And so I guess what I'm taking from that is like, there is a limit where you get to the point where you're looking at these companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook, which is now Meta, where you get to the point where it's like, okay, I understand that, and Apple, I understand that these are private companies, but at what point does it get to the point where if somebody leaves your app and they want to create their own thing, and then they can't create their own thing, and then because now the fucking Amazon, who owns like what, 70-80% of the fucking internet servers or something like that, they won't host your fucking shit. It's like, well, at what point does this become like a fucking monopoly on the internet? At what point does it become a real argument of free speech? I know I'm wondering if we're at that point now, personally.
Maybe. I don't know. I've been holding in a piss because I wanted to hear that whole train of thought. I'm going to go pee real quick.
Oh, yeah, knock it out. I'll give us our sponsors. Today we are sponsored, but it's a long-time sponsor of the podcast, guys. We're looking at the three horsemen of LFTS: Miller Lite, Gatorade Zero, and Monster Energy Zero Ultra. We're making one of our famous cocktails here. This is an LFTS exclusive cocktail. It's half Monster, half Haterade. And what you just made for yourself is a little bit of Monsterade, baby. And Monsterade's good because it has all that great flavor of Gatorade Zero, which almost has all that great flavor of regular Gatorade. And you get all that energy, that white trash energy that you get from a good cold Monster Zero Ultra. And then you take a little edge off with some Miller Lite. And last but not least, you're going to wash that down with an ice cold Camel Crush.
Now back to the program.
So,
Ooh, chilly out there.
it is true that, because I was thinking about this, I was thinking, at what point would it not make sense for guys like Joe Rogan and other people who have been deplatformed to just kind of make their own thing?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's like, it sucks because the only reason I know about Joe Rogan is because of YouTube. And the only reason I know about anybody who's not currently on YouTube is because I found them on YouTube first. Mm-hmm. Because that's like, for all intents,
it's the gateway drug.
It is.
Yeah.
You're on YouTube, you find random people, and then, but once you take them out of the public sphere, and I will use that terminology even though it's not technically public, but it's like, that's kind of, YouTube is like the fucking, that's the cafeteria. That's the lunchroom at your school. That's like, you know, that's where you're at. Everybody's there. All grades, all fucking classes, whatever. And then you branch off into your own little thing. you put Joe Rogan in a position where he's not allowed to be in a highly trafficked main prime platform, then only the people that already know about him are going. So his message, his voice does not get to anyone who doesn't already listen to him. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's like there are consequences, because a lot of these guys wind up making more money. Like Alex Jones probably makes more money now that he's exclusive on InfoWars, because now you have to listen to him on his website, and there's probably better ways of counting whatever. I don't know how the fuck it works. And I'm sure if Joe Rogan made his own fucking website and just said fuck it to everybody and was like, JRE.com, that's where you're going to listen to all the shit, I'm sure that would make a lot of money. But the problem is that information, the people that he's having on the podcast, is not getting out to the general public. And I think that's the problem, is when you tighten up so hard on what is allowed and acceptable for general consumption, so that if you want any type of thing that strays away from the absolute ideological narrative consensus, you have to go to this like niche type of like separate hideaway thing.
Yeah.
You're losing out on such a broader reach.
Yeah. It's just, it's kind of crazy, because it's like, podcasts don't have ratings or anything, Mm-hmm. But I don't think this is a situation where people would be happy if it was behind like an 18 plus. Like, you have to be an adult to listen to this, because I don't think they think adults can listen to it without being corrupted or something.
Well, yeah, and
it's very strange.
That is the thought. And as a common man, I personally take offense to that. Mm-hmm. I take personal offense to the fact that there's some.
You don't think my poor small brain.
You don't think I can handle an episode of Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
You think I need to be protected from that? It is such a condescending,
little tiny small Joe Rogan is so scary.
Yeah, it's like it really does. It is an insult to the public's intelligence that we have these people in higher positions of whether it be money or power, or usually both, that are saying to us, like they're the principal at the school, okay, kids, we're not watching that. You're in computer lab and this website's blocked. And it's like, that's great when you're 9. Yeah. That's great when you're a fucking kid. But it amazes me how comfortable people are with being treated and sheltered like children when they're grown fucking adults. The people are legitimately terrified of the fact that there is somebody somewhere saying something that they disagree with. And because of that, it needs to stop. It's fucking insane, and it doesn't have to be a government thing when it's a cultural thing. It's some type of fucking weird shift that you're seeing, and honestly, yeah. I think they jumped the shark on this one. Well,
no, now you see like I think when you're talking about it being like a coordinated attack before, I think it's almost in a sense like similar to like a marketing company being like, all right, we're gonna try to make this video go viral. Mm-hmm. Like, we're gonna do like this really touching story about a mother reuniting with her daughter and giving her favorite blanket back, and now it's clean because we used Tide on it.
It's touching.
It's very touching, and it's gonna go viral. Mm-hmm. Like, our goal for this is to go viral.
Yeah,
I guarantee you that there are like ad agencies or like PR firms that are specifically out there to be like, all right, how can we get the internet to turn on someone for us this week?
But then it does also beg the question. It's like, of course it was going to be Rogan, because he has the biggest voice. He has the biggest voice, and it always happens to someone who has a voice that's a large platform that is not controlled by anybody. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. No one is more hated by the higher-ups than someone who has not just as big of a platform as they do, but a bigger one that they don't have control over, that they don't get to tell him what to do. They don't get to tell him what he's talking about tonight. It's not fucking Jimmy Fallon. It's not Stephen Colbert. It's not Trevor Noah. It's not these fucking people where they just are handed, here's the talking points of the night. Here's what we're going to say. Here's the narrative we're going to push. Here's the blah, 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 blah. It's this guy who will have on anybody, and he's the most culturally relevant, whether you fucking like it or not. If you haven't listened to it, what the fuck are you doing? I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world, but it's like, you're either actively avoiding it at this point, and if you are, then it's like you don't
that's
have.
That's okay too. You
that's
don't
okay.
Have to listen to it,
but you don't really have a place to speak on it at that juncture. It's like anybody I know who's saying like, yeah, fucking, he's a fucking maniac anyway. He's just a fucking idiot who's on Fear Factor. It's like, you haven't. I guarantee you haven't listened to one full episode. And even if you haven't, you still think that it's like, then you still have to bridge the gap to be like, oh, because I think he's an idiot, that now means we have to remove him from the internet? That's your next jump? Explain that. I don't understand that. You know what I mean? So like, I don't fucking know, dude. I don't know. I think, like I said earlier, I think they jumped the shark on this one because I really think it backfired. And I think, you know,
they could have waited at least until he wasn't. I mean, and who knows how long he'll be like culturally relevant, but like he's pretty much like at a peak right now.
He would
like,
be
cultural relevance, I'd say.
If anything, this has boosted his popularity.
Yeah,
because
sure.
a lot of people have probably decided to at least listen to him, whether they're skeptical or they're just interested. Be like, oh, I didn't know there was this guy causing all this rift. Maybe let me hear what he has to say. And so, like, if anything, this has boosted him, and that's why I do believe that this whole thing, like, when I say they, you know who I'm talking about. They went too fucking far.
Who's they?
They is just the fucking elites, dog. The fucking people that control shit, you know? And I hate using that word because it's just like any fucking word that I use is tagged to some fucking other thing that's like, oh, you must think this. Like, no, I'm using the words elites.
I just want to make sure you're not trying to say Jews.
Well, come on. Obviously, come on. Read between the lines here, dude. They the fuck was I even talking about? Oh, they went too far because it was okay to take out a guy like Alex Jones because he had a large voice, large platform, but at the end of the day, it was only a certain group of people that listened. Bro, everyone, I don't mean everyone as in every person, but every group of people fucks with him. Mm-hmm. White people, black people, immigrants, fucking gay people, trans people, straight people, comedians, actors, musicians, fighters. Everyone fucks with Rogan. Mm-hmm. So for you to try to come out and take him, you just united us. You've spent so long dividing us along those lines. Oh, you're this person, you're in this group. That then you came for the one guy that everyone was like, no, hold on, 1 second. I fuck with Rogan. You're trying to tell me Rogan's bad? Now I could see this kind of being like a kind of pendulum swinging the other direction. Either they're going to succeed, and this is the problem I have with pussy corporations too. The fact that, again, you don't fucking concede. It's like when we talked about Sundance. What they did, and apparently I asked, just a brief update on that. I got to ask Alex more about this, but apparently he was saying he disputed the thing. It was on his friend's credit card. Mm-hmm. They disputed the payment. Sundance had 15 days to like argue the dispute. And then if they didn't, then they got to keep the money. He hasn't heard from his friend whether or not they did. And that time span has long passed at this point. So either his friend just has the money and hasn't Venmoed him the half, or
they're suing her.
or they're fucking, or they did argue the dispute and they lost their money. But what we were talking about on that was how Sundance was basically saying, or not saying anything. That was their thing. They were accused of something, and then instead of apologizing for it or acknowledging that they did something wrong, they just didn't say anything. They were just like, because once you acknowledge it, you've conceded in some way that you have actually done something worth apologizing for.
Yeah.
So, and once you've done that, it's like when you're in a boxing match and you land a punch. And then you can always see when people are boxing, they land that one punch and it's like, oh shit. And then they go try to get a flurry, try to catch him off guard. And it's like, the mistake that Joe made there was he apologized for something that everyone already knew was the case. We don't think you're a racist. People don't think you're a racist. Like, and the people that are attacking you for being racist, they also don't think you're racist. They want you off that platform for other reasons. And so they're not looking for you to grow from this. They're not looking for you to become a better person who has learned and had a growing experience and now understands this thing better than you did 10 years ago. No, what they want is to fucking remove you. That's what they want.
No, what they want is the $100 million Spotify deal for themselves.
Yes. And the minute you fucking even give a little bit and be like, hey, you've gotten to me. You've gotten through my armor. And now you're in my head. And now you've in some way legitimized your cause by forcing me to do this thing. Mm-hmm. And your cause is not legitimate. Your cause is not coming from a good place. So that's why Sundance never wound up giving refunds to people because that's why Trump got away with all the shit he said because he never fucking said he's sorry. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry because now you're going to fucking come get me. I'm not sorry, but that's the way it really works. And you can do that when you're being a piece of shit, but also you should do that when you're not being a piece of shit. Don't apologize for something that's not wrong, and don't apologize to someone that's not interested in whether or not it's right or wrong, but they're coming after you for some other bullshit. They're jealous of your fame. They don't want your message being out there because it conflicts with their message and what they're able to make money off of. That was a mistake. So, again, this isn't going to work, I think. And then it'll be the next thing. If they're stupid, they'll come at it from another angle. They might come at it from a transphobic angle. They might put together a compilation of him talking about the transgender fighters and being a woman and talking to Ben Shapiro and being, can you be a guy or a girl? They're going to keep on trying these angles. But the problem is that they have underestimated the general public as thinking that we are that fucking stupid. And this is why I kind of love this, because you really are kind of seeing that unified front of people just being like, no, dude, fuck you. Fuck you. And they kind of show their hand a little bit.